Well, hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Sharon Vornholt, and I'm so glad you're tuning in today. Have you ever wondered about investing in another area other than where you live? I'm guessing you probably have. For most of us, we would be thinking about another state. However, my guest today, Billy Keels, invests in another country. Billy is coming to us all the way from Barcelona, Spain. He's on a mission to help those high-wage earners and or retirees that have been forgotten by so many in society. He's determined to help you feel comfortable and confident going against conventional wisdom by being okay with investing in real assets and doing that beyond your own backyard. He has traveled extensively over the past 23 years throughout some 85 countries in his corporate job, and he's also fluent in 5 languages. I think it's safe to say he's an overachiever. As part of his journey, he's hyper-focused on consistently helping you to create new alternatives for your life so that you can be happy going to your job each day or not. Welcome to the show, Billy.
Hey, Sharon, this is a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to having another conversation with you. And I'm sure this is going to be very, very fun and educational and exciting. So looking forward to it.
It is. And you have such an awesome bio. I wanted to just give you the opportunity to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got where you are today.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. And if you allow me just one thing, because there's kind of something I think that's really important to share. Number one is, like I said, it's great to be able to share another conversation with you. And I appreciate that you invested your time with me in the Going Long podcast on episode 107. So everybody should go and check it out because Sharon was awesome and she was helping us really understand all the things and talked about branding and talked about marketing and talked about probate, and which was awesome. And also, if you're listening and watching or watching, make sure that you take a second to at least leave a very honest written review and rating for Sharon, because she puts a lot of love and hard work and effort into this. And I know that as a fellow podcaster, it's something that's really important. And in terms of being able to continue to bring you as much value as possible. So just take a couple seconds of a nice, honest written review and rating. So with that, Sharon, it's really, as a person who is originally from Columbus, Ohio, I kind of got, I guess it wasn't lost because I ended up being here in Europe on purpose. As you mentioned before, and when I was right after college, I had an opportunity to work and travel throughout some 58 different countries. It was amazing. I was living in St. Louis, Missouri, but I was traveling like 25 to 28 days a month. So it was just amazing. Since then, I've been able to go to another 30 some or 28 countries, so 86 countries to this point in time, and has really helped me to form my worldview today. But one of the things, as a recovering perfectionist and a former A student, I kind of fell into this trap of always doing what I was told. So I went and I got a really good job, and I was really worried about climbing the corporate ladder and doing that, and was continuing to want to rise. And then I was also told, make sure that you put start saving for retirement, and you put that in your 401k, and then once you max that out in the IRA, and make sure that your whole retirement is taken care of. And as an A student, I followed directions and I was doing that. And then this thing in 2000 came around where there was a dot-com bubble. And so I'd been working for about 5-6 years. And at that point, I saw my portfolio value decrease. And because I don't come from a family with lots of money, and it was kind of like I was working and saving all this money and I was feeling really good. And all of a sudden I just got deflated. And so when that happened, I remember my financial advisor saying, hey, you know what, Billy, no big deal. You just want to make sure that you continue to keep funding that because it's going to help on the dollar cost averaging over time. You're going to get back to where you were. You're going to see blah, blah, blah. And you know what, true to form, the financial advisor was right. And eventually I got back and that took about 8 years. And at the end of that 8 years, Sharon, you know what happened? 2008. And I lost 33% of my portfolio. Mm-hmm. Now, I was living in Europe at the time. I'd started in Paris, France. I was on a 1-year sabbatical, and then a 1-year sabbatical, and I was supposed to learn more about French language, culture. I was going to learn how to salsa dance, and was going to learn about wine. Don't ask me why those 3 things, but those were the 3 things. And eventually I left there. That was in 2001. I went from there down to the south in Montpellier, and I ended up working in the IT industry. So I started in IT. They sent me away to Italy to start up a sales team. So I was living in Italy for about 7 months. Then I went back to France. In the meantime, I met a really nice Spanish woman who left France and moved to Barcelona. And so after about 2 years dating back and forth, she didn't want to move back to France. And I was like, well, Barcelona seems like a pretty cool place. So I ended up moving to Barcelona. And that was in 2005. And so to kind of catch up on the story, we were in 2008 when I lost my funds. I picked up this book called Rich Dad Poor Dad. I read a little bit about it, but I didn't actually finish it. And it wasn't for a couple of years that I actually finished the book. But I remember one of the things that motivated me to really stand out was when coming back to the story I was telling, in 2008 when I lost 33% of my portfolio, just kind of like that hurt a lot. And especially because I was following instructions. Like as an A student, you follow the instructions and you get an A on the test. And I was like, I'd failed twice because like instead of going up and to the right, it just went crashing down. And so when the thing happened in 2000, I was kind of like, okay, well, that happened once. And so as my parents always told me, shame on you. But the same thing happened to me 8 years later. And then it was like, shame on me. Mm-hmm. And so that was really when I started getting involved in real estate as a way to have more control and also be able to create consistent cash flow, because that's what I was really, really interested in. And after reading the book and then started watching podcasts listening to podcasts and watching some videos on YouTube and things like that, I was like, wow, this seems really, really like an awesome asset to be able to utilize to be able to have more control and cash flow. And then there were this thing that I wasn't too worried about at the time, but now I definitely am, were tax benefits. So that's a little bit about my story. I'm sure we can get into like all my work in Barcelona. By the way, I think we can talk about this. I've never actually ever purchased a property in Barcelona.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about that. So you started with single family homes, correct?
Well, you know what? I've never, ever purchased a single family home either. Ever. My very first property, it was a duplex.
Duplex,
okay. Yeah, so I bought my very first property. It was a duplex, and it was about 6,000 miles from where I live. And it was also about 9,000 miles from where I was, because I was in Egypt the very first time that I closed on my very first property. My wife and I were in Egypt for a nice weekend, and that was fun. That was an interesting time.
Well, that is interesting. So you were in Egypt and you bought your first property. That must have been somewhat challenging.
You know what? It was. And, you know, when you have those moments where you kind of think to yourself, well, okay, you want to move forward. And we started moving forward. We never took into consideration where we would be, because I'd never purchased any properties before. So I didn't really know exactly the amount of time that it was going to take. I knew that there may have been a risk, but it's kind of like sometimes when you shouldn't eat that extra little bite additional, like you just kind of do it anyway. And well, we did it anyway, and we happened to be a long way away, but it all worked out. And the team worked really, really well. And I was very, very fortunate, because that first purchase ended up being one of the most positive, emotional things that I'd ever done. And it was also financially very, very positive as well.
Okay. So are you still, you're still in the multifamily today then?
I am. So there are a couple of things actually. One of the things that I have been doing, so I continue to be in the smaller multifamily. In my own portfolio, I've had a quadplex and duplexes. I've also purchased a mobile home park. So that was something that I never even planned either. But there was a very different process, and working with an amazing team, ended up purchasing a mobile home park, which I had never thought about. I've invested passively as well in things like ATM machines. I've also invested passively in larger multifamily properties. And recently I figured out a way to solve a specific problem that I was having. And this is I guess, because I'm someone I still work in a day job. So I work in a really demanding one of these kind of like multi-six-figure salary kind of roles. And so in that job, it doesn't allow me any time to become a real estate professional, you know, the IRS designation of a real estate professional. And so I kept getting these big passive losses, and these passive losses just kind of kept building up. And I was not able to take advantage of them, because usually you have to do that at disposition, which is like 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, and things like that. And so I ended up finding out about the energy sector, which is also something that's a tangible asset. And I've now been investing in and raising funds for large pieces of energy equipment. And the reason that I do that is because of the way that these are structured. It allows to create consistent returns over a short amount of time, as well as provide some really significant tax benefits, especially for those people that are not real estate professionals and are on high paying jobs, basically.
Okay.
So yeah, but always things that are tangible, always things that I can touch. I definitely have a big love for real estate, and now I'm really enjoying energy sector as well.
Now, what exactly is in the energy sector? What exactly are we talking about?
So this specifically is around, are you, I guess, familiar with so many different people today are talking about net zero emissions and what can we do to make sure that we're aligned with the Paris Agreement and things like that. And so one of the main ways for large energy companies to be more socially responsible is to do their part to either take out or minimize CO2 emissions into the atmosphere. So specifically this piece of equipment, it's an equipment that's also mixed with a specific solvent. What this does is it helps to remove CO2 from the atmosphere, and then it uses some of that CO2 enriched gas, oil and gas, to be able to, well, just help larger companies be able to produce oil and gas in a much more profitable and socially responsible way. Ultimately is what this does. And for those people that are not real estate professionals, there's a way that they can also do something that is socially responsible and also provides consistent returns over time.
It's so interesting that you found a way to make all that work, and it wasn't real estate's your focus, but this wasn't a real estate thing. Let me ask you this. Why have you never invested in Spain or in Europe? I have to ask you that.
Now, Sharon, that's a wonderful question. And it's an interesting story. So like after I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, remember, because I was saying I picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad, and sometimes you pick up this book and you have all the best intentions of reading it and life gets in the way. And before you know it, you're like, oh, well, I didn't finish that book. And then you're like, oh, well, hang on a second. So now I'm going to finish it. And so that happened to me. And I remember being so excited, and I was like, oh my gosh, control, and you can take this and have control, and you can go buy the property and you're going to earn $200 and $300 a door per month and blah, blah, blah. And so this is going to be $2,400, $3,600 a year plus however many doors. And so then I started looking in Barcelona because it's where I lived. And I was like, oh my gosh, let me look at this. And so when I started doing the underwriting, and I wasn't sophisticated enough at the time, Sharon, to understand any of this stuff, but I was underwriting the deals, and instead of saying plus 200, plus 300, they would come out and they would say minus 35, minus 60, minus 100 a month. And I was thinking, well, just hang on a second. The book says that it should be plus 200, plus 300. Yeah, exactly. And so what I didn't understand at the time, Sharon, was there are different types of markets or different types of locations. There are some locations that are really much better for creating cash flow. Louisville, Columbus, Ohio, these types of markets, right? You may get some appreciation, but really there's a lot of there's more cash flow than appreciation. And then of course you can get the tax benefits. And then there are other types of markets, New York, Los Angeles, Barcelona, that are much more appreciation based. And so the things that I read, when I tried to apply them to where I lived, the numbers weren't working for me. Right. Yeah. And then I looked at another European city and I was like, well, this doesn't work at all. And it was really thanks to a couple of friends of mine, 3 different friends, and like over 3 months, I had 3 different conversations with friends of mine. I was telling them what was going on, and they were like, hey, listen, well, you're an American. Why don't you just buy in the United States? And I was thinking to myself, that is so obvious, but don't you see the Atlantic Ocean between like right where I live? Right, exactly. I'm like, well, hang on a second. This is never going to work. Why would you ever buy something when you live one place and the other place is 6,000 or 4,000 miles away? It just didn't make any sense. Then I took a step back and I was like, okay, well, what is the desired outcome that you want, Billy? And so when I started realizing what it was, and I started realizing, okay, well, I actually have the means to do that now. It's just a matter of getting out of my way, because remember, I'm a recovering perfectionist and that A student, so sometimes this paralysis analysis can affect us. And I was going through that, and then afterwards, after I had those conversations with the friends, I just jumped right in and said, it's time to do it. It's time to do it. So the reason that kind of telling that story, but the reason that I've never purchased a property here in Europe is because I have not found any any specific location in Europe that I've looked at where I feel like I would have enough control that can match the locations where I currently invest in the United States. And whether those are multifamily, whether those are ATM machines, or whether that's energy equipment, I just haven't found anything that can match what I've been able to find back in the U.S. locations.
Well, that's a great answer. And I figured it had something to do with that. Different economies, different, like you pointed out, the difference in LA and Columbus. They're two totally different markets. So in some of the things I've read, you mentioned that you like to help two groups of people, high wage earners and retirees, which are generally on opposite ends of the spectrum. So tell me about that.
So actually, let's start with the retirees. So one of the things that I have found, and this is recently, and this is probably a lot has to do with my experience that I've had in the energy sector and what I've started to see, is that a number of people, as they get closer and closer to retirement, at least the people that I've been in touch with, and this is why I've started realizing, okay, well, I think I can help here, is because you've been typically working for a really long time. You've worked 20, 30, 40 years of your life. You have funds that you may now have that are in a 401k and in an IRA, and you realize that, okay, these funds, because they're part of a defined contribution plan and not part of a defined benefits plan, that these funds are going to be limited until, well, you run out of the funds. And then when the funds are gone, then you have to figure out what you're going to do for that portion of your portfolio. And usually the people that I'm speaking to, this is a portion of their portfolio, so that it's not the only thing that they've had for retirement. But typically you would get into these conversations where you say, well, okay, well, yes, I have this amount of money, but I'm only allowed to take out a little bit, because if I take out more, then I'm going to get taxed more. And I'm not a tax advisor or any of that kind of stuff. I'm not giving anybody advice. But one of the things that people don't consider is that the money that are in these qualified plans, they're typically the highest taxed. No, not typically. They are the highest taxed, right? Because this qualified funds are taxed at ordinary income rates. And without getting into a long thing, it's people save for 40 years of their lives, and they realize that they're putting all this money away where it has no option to be done anything other than taxed at the highest possible percentage. And so when I started finding a vehicle that could potentially help them, I thought, hey, listen, this is an interesting way to start to help and work with retirees that have money that is trapped in a quote unquote 401k or an IRA jail. Because once they're qualified, then they're going to be taxed at the highest rate no matter what, whether you take out a very little bit or you take a whole bunch out at one way or the other. So being able to sit down with retirees and figure out, okay, this portion of your capital that's in qualified funds, what do you plan on doing with that? Do you plan on, just helping them to think through which options are available so that they can not just live comfortably, but also feel that they have more control to be able to have those funds not qualified anymore, but actually in their own control. So that was the kind of the first reason, because I started seeing people like, yeah, I can only spend this amount of money. I'm like, well, it's your money. And so it kind of became passionate for me. Then the other thing is around high wage earners and professionals is that, Sharon, I'm guilty of this as well, which is, I guess, probably why I can relate to this even more. But a lot of times I start seeing so many people that are high wage earners, highly paid professionals, and just super busy, like really, really busy. And what no one talks about is usually these high paid professionals are working from like missing breakfast with their children. They're on an airplane first thing in the morning. They think that this is the best life because they're going to be rising towards something. They're going to get this big, huge check, and they're getting home at night. Well, their spouse is already in bed, their kids are in bed, they haven't seen them in 5 or 6 days. And usually when you ask them about their own personal finances, they know a lot less about that than they do about the KPIs or key performance indicators at the jobs that they're working in. And so when you start realizing that what we do in our jobs, and I like because I'm in a corporate role right now, I really like my role. The thing that's happened is you also start to realize that there's a perspective that you have to be able to put on things. And for those people that I recognize that, hey, listen, you know what? I like what I'm doing in my day job. I feel like I've outsourced all of my financial life to somebody else who really is interested in selling their product more than really helping me and my family move in the direction that's going to help us to have more control and financially well off. I like being able to talk to those people just to help open their eyes so that they understand their own personal finances as well as they understand the KPIs at the jobs that they work in. So those are the two really people that I feel like I'm best equipped to help, and the ones that I'm helping the most, even as of today. And I think a lot of times people forget, well, if you're a retiree that has, $2-3 million in your account, then nobody really worries about you. And if you're a high paid professional, no one's thinking about you either. Probably pushing the envelope a little bit, but that's kind of how it is. And that doesn't mean that you still don't need help, because you may not have the financial literacy that you need to be able to feel comfortable and feel confident on a daily basis. And usually I find that when you have more control and you're in those positions, you're more willing and wanting to help other people. And so it becomes a way to really help benefit more and more people.
Well, you get to share your expertise because you've taken the time to learn that. So I want to segue over here to the investing in another country. This, for most people, you obviously have to have systems, you have to have boots on the ground. So let's talk about what has to happen in order. Let's say that I'm in Europe, or I'm somewhere I could really be across the country and need the same systems to invest. What needs to happen? What are the systems you need to do, and how do you build a team to do this? A reliable team.
Yeah, and I love a couple things. Just the question in general, how to do that. The fact that in your question, you're also recognizing what I think, without a doubt, what I like to call long distance investing, as you know, is there are there are 4 elements to long distance investing. The way that I see it, number one, and I did it the exact opposite way, Sharon, when I bought my first property. So I did it completely the wrong way. Got a lot of bumps and bruises, which is actually now why I tell people, hey, listen, check it out this way, because this is probably much better. Because in the beginning, I had the money, so I bought the property. I started making money. After I made money, I started realizing that, hey, you know what? Things started breaking and things weren't perfect. And the residents actually needed help, and residents needed service calls. And I didn't actually have a team in place. So that wasn't a very good experience for any of the residents that were in the place. So I actually had to build a team really, really quickly. And then afterwards, I started recognizing that the team actually understood the location that I was in. And the location, fortunately for me, because I didn't put any thought into it at all, that location was one that actually helped to get or produce cash flow. So I was very fortunate, but it was not by design. And then the fourth thing was, the one thing that I did know is that I wanted to create cash flow. And so what I normally will now help to share and educate others with is to really think about, what is it that you really want? What's the benefit that you want? Are you looking for cash flow? Are you looking for tax benefits? Are you looking for some type of equity buildup? Are you looking for some type of appreciation over time? And then once you're crystal clear on that, Sharon, then it's about helping people to go to the next step, which is, okay, well, now that you know personally what it is that the benefit that you're looking for, where is the location that will provide you that? Will give you the highest probability of achieving whatever that personal objective is? And then once you find the location, and this is why I love what you just said, because then it's about what I consider to be the absolute most important part of the long distance investing thesis, is making sure that you have an amazing team. Because if you don't have an amazing team, then you're going to have a lot of sleepless nights. And the one thing that you can definitely count on being is what I like to call ROS negative, or return on sleep negative. And nobody likes to do that. So make sure you have a really strong team, because then after you have the strong team, you're able to then be able to buy a single family house. You can buy a 250 unit apartment complex. You can buy a piece of energy equipment, or you can buy ATM machines. But those 4 things need to really be in line to give you, as the investor, whether you're active or passive, the best probability of achieving your goal, which is ultimately what you want to be able to do. And so just kind of giving that as a background, Sharon, the thing that what I found in terms of being able to build a really, really strong team, number one, is when you go to the location, look for referrals. And I mean, look for referrals from your trusted advisors or groups. If you're a part of a RIA organization, ask in the RIA, who is the best property manager in this specific location. And not just any property manager. Like, one of the things you want to make sure is that they're the property manager that understands your resident base, because it doesn't do you any good. And I like to use the example of, if you go to everybody likes to eat, right? And so if you want to go to have a fast food experience, you may go to McDonald's, or if you want a fine dining experience, you will go to a 3-star Michelin restaurant. And as long as you go to either one of these two places, you're going to get fed and you're going to have an experience. But it would be really, really weird to go to McDonald's and see a maitre d' welcome you there, or to go to a 3-star Michelin restaurant and see the McDonald's greeter there, right? Exactly. I mean, that would be really, really weird. So you want to make sure that your team understands your resident. And then once you go beyond the referral, Sharon, one of the things I like to keep things as simple as possible. And it really is, once you have the referrals, or if you don't have referrals, then you go to trusted online sources that you may want to look up. And that could be everything from the Better Business Bureau. There may be an online version of a real estate investment association. You may have, I remember I used to look up Zillow, and I would see which realtor showed up the most. And that realtor that showed up the most, it meant at least they were thinking about marketing. They were thinking about connecting with new people. This was for someone I didn't know. And then I would call that person and I would see what their system was like. How easy was it for me to get in touch with them? Because if that person is playing at a high level to be highly visible, there is a higher probability that they're also running with other people that want to be high visibility, work with clients that are of a certain type of, or looking for a certain type of client as well. So those are maybe some practical steps. Some of them are having a referral. Some of them are not having a referral, but one way or the other after that, Sharon, I would say it's really about like building any other really strong, positive relationship. It has to start out by saying, I would like, after you get to know one another, I'd like to be able to do this. And then when you say you're going to do something, do it. And when the other person that you're speaking to says they're going to do something, they need to do it. Because if not, then you're not building the right foundation for the relationship. But that could start online. It could start with a couple of emails. It starts with a couple of phone calls. Eventually, it's going to go from there to maybe getting on a Zoom session, or if you have the possibility to meet up for a cup of coffee. And then after that, it's going to, if you can't meet up for a cup of coffee and there are more and more Zoom sessions, eventually when it makes enough sense, you're going to get on a plane. And that's one of the ways that I think about as a long distance investor is email, phone conversation. Next step is Zoom calls, getting to know one another, getting to see some of the operations, maybe using FaceTime to see some of their facilities. And then eventually you're going to have to, I believe, you're going to have to get on an airplane or a boat or whatever to make sure that you're building the relationship face to face. Because, and Sharon, as you know, and I know your entire audience knows this, in the real estate, or any tangible asset, it's really about the relationships, because that's when you're going to gain the access, the insights to the types of opportunities that really make the most sense for you, for your investors, and the people that you're looking to help. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, Billy, and that was the thing I wanted to get at is, were you going to fly all the way from Europe to whatever the destination was at some point? So you're going to meet face to face with them.
Sharon, I believe that especially because it's a matter of just showing the commitment that you have. For instance, when I bought my first properties in the state of New Jersey, I didn't have a process. I just was buying because I knew that if things went wrong, I had family that was in the area. But then when I actually put that process in place that I was telling you about, the personal, then looking at the location, the team, and the opportunity, that's when I bought the mobile home park. But it started just meeting somebody online. I called the NARPM, like NARPM.com. I was looking for different property managers in a certain city, literally called, I don't know if it was 50 or 60 that I called. And then from there, I got down to like 5 or 6. And then I was down to 3, and eventually build a relationship. And for the first year, it was all over email and Zoom, because we put in a couple of offers, but we didn't actually get the offers. But once the first offer went in and we were under contract and then we didn't, Then I actually made a flight to the US, even though we weren't going to close, because I knew that this was the team that I wanted to be able to have. I wanted to be able to go much deeper with them. And it was important for me not to just be seen as just another overseas or California investor, right? Because they get a lot of them. And so I'm really interested in building relationships and making purchases. And so that was a way for me to demonstrate that, hey, like this person actually got on the phone, got on a flight from Spain to fly here. So I'm just a big believer, and that's a way you have to put your money where your mouth is at a certain point in time. So I definitely think so.
That is so smart. And that process, I use that exact process when I interview offshore workers. Now, I've not yet been fortunate enough to jump on a plane and go to New Zealand. One of my VAs immigrated to New Zealand, but it's like a regular interview. But I agree completely with you, Billy, that you have to show up certainly in real estate at some point. You have to show up, be a real person, and build those relationships, because real estate is totally a relationship business.
Agreed. Completely agreed.
You knew some of those areas. You were from Columbus, but there were also areas you've gone into where you didn't know street by street which ones were good, like you would if you lived in Columbus and you worked Columbus. You would know a lot of that just because you were there. How do you rely 100% on the agents or the people to choose? In some areas it's almost block by block, or this section over here is good, but this section over here is bad. How do you combat that problem?
So there is a certain point where you're going to have to rely on your team if you're not from that specific area. But there's enough data that is available nowadays, in whether you are at city-data.com or you can find data that's from the BLS.gov. I mean, there's a lot of census data that, number one, at just really high level, that can help you understand if you want to understand median income, or you want to understand how many people live in a specific area. You can find all of that information online. Even some of the applications that you can find that are real estate related nowadays, they'll intertwine like local police data with residential data, so you can find it there as well. But where I find that the real power comes in is when you have a strong team. It's a matter of being able to sit down and say, hey, you know what? It was really interesting, Sharon, as we're talking about City X, I noticed that the median income in this particular area code was about $30,000 more than in this other particular blah, blah, blah. And it seems that this is something that's changed over the last 5 years or the last 10 years, because you want to use census data or something like that. Sharon, what would you say would be the reason for that? Because what you're doing at that point, you're really showing your property management company or whoever your team member is that you've been doing your homework. You're also recognizing certain trends, and you trust them, and you want them to also help you verify why they believe that this is happening. And it's not even a subliminal thing. It's just that you let that person know that, hey, look, and when I say you, it's you or your team, that you're in tune to what's happening in the specific area. And that's also going to help to foster credibility between the two of you. And then once again, when you're on the flight, once it makes sense, or you're asking somebody, now you're using technology, hey, listen, could you go to show me this specific area, show me why it's different on one side of the street or the other, then you're really using technology to help build the relationship, and then you're trusting and verifying at the same time through these different multiple types of interactions that you're having with people. So hopefully that answers the question, but I really see that as a mix, and that's the way that I've done it in the past, is pulling data that's available on the internet, getting your team or your potential team, seeing how much they will be willing to, drive to a certain area, have one of their team members do a FaceTime and show you exactly what it looks like, and then have that conversation so you can really start to know the city better, and also give them the opportunity to say, hey, look, this side of the street you don't want to do, that side of the street yes, but really based on more data and understanding, and always looking to do that to build the relationship with more credibility. credibility.
Well, let me ask you this. This just popped into my head. So you're talking about people going out and doing FaceTimes and showing you areas. Are you talking about your realtor who would be compensated if you were to buy something? Or are you talking about paying people for their time? Or both?
My thought was really not even a realtor, but a property management company that you would right, but that you would think, or you know what, I would say any team member that you want to engage with more than one transaction. And the reason for that is if they're not willing or able, well, no, I guess if they're not able to, they're not able to, but if they're not willing to go to a specific area or a specific property, it may not be the team member that you want to work with. And because they're not really bought into the same long-term vision that you are, because if you're looking to literally build a team, that means you're looking to build a team and make purchases, which means that you're not just looking for a transaction, you're looking to develop a relationship. And so as long as you're both on the same page, if you thought the relationship was worth it, you would probably do that. If they thought it was worth it, they would probably do that. If they're not doing it, it's for a reason. So I would start to ask if this is the right member of the team. That's kind of the first thing. And I would think about that not having any type of payment related to it at all. If not, if you need someone that, you know, now there are more and more people that are providing these types of services, you may want to contract someone who does bird dogging and they go out and they'll check it out for you and see things. Or you may just have someone that wants to go out and they say that they will drive a particular area. But I would be more focused on seeing if it's a potential team member that will do it and give of their time, because they're investing their most valuable resource to do that. At the same time, you have to recognize that you don't want to abuse that because you're building a relationship. And exactly. if you can't find that as a possibility, Sharon, then I would go to how can I pay someone directly for their time to give me a specific bit of data? You may want to think about that as a strategy, right? You know that there are certain people that are in an area, you know that one side of the street is better. And so say, hey, listen, I need you to go over and I want to pay you to do the next 25, $50, whatever it costs to get that preliminary information. And then they send it back to you. Mm-hmm. Then you may want to engage in a conversation and ask the potential team member, hey, what do you think about this area? And you're going to get their feedback on what that specific area is like as well. I mean, there's a number of ways that you can use technology to build relationships, build trust, and at the same time use that same technology to verify things that you need to suss out from a potential team member.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. You want to build the relationship with the team member, but there are also services out there like boots on the ground type of things that will, for $25, $50, sometimes for $100 if you want a really extensive report. But I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea to kind of have a system of checks and balances, maybe not on every property, but on some properties, to be sure that everybody stays on the same team. But don't you think, Billy, this comes back to core values? Yep. They have to buy into the whole value system and the whole bigger picture to really be a fit for your team. I have found from talking to so many entrepreneurs, they hire for the person for, will they fit in? Are they the right fit for what we're doing? Not so much for actual skills. Can you type, or whatever that was a terrible example, but they hire for not for skills.
Correct. A lot of it is value, character. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I mean, those are things that and I guess it goes back to the whole mindset, right? If you're looking to just go in and execute on one transaction, none of that may make any difference. But when you start talking about, as you think about investing longer distances, or if you're going to make repeat purchases in your own backyard, I mean, it's the same thing, because you're looking to build relationships. So in the same way that you would not want to create a bad reputation in a certain area, it's the same thing, whether it's your backyard or it's a long way. And so you want to make sure also that when you have a certain philosophy, a certain way of doing business, that you want to make sure that the people that are on your team are aligned with your value system, because if they're not, it's not going to be a very long lasting relationship, in my opinion.
This is such great information. I want to kind of ask you one more thing.
Sure.
If someone wants to do this, where do they start? And what are the biggest obstacles that you think they're going to find right off the bat?
Well, I guess a couple of things. So I guess anyone that is here listening to you, Let's Talk Real Estate Investing, they're already doing so much more than most people are, Sharon, because so many people are just kind of not even in tune to any type of possibilities. So I would say as you're watching and you're listening, you're already ahead of so many other people. At this point, it's about how do you take the knowledge that you're learning and how do you put it into action? Right. So it may be as simple as saying, okay, well, I know that I want to, I live in, and I'll just use Columbus, Ohio again. I live in Columbus, Ohio, or no, I'll use Barcelona. Let's say I'm in Barcelona. I live in Barcelona. I'm listening to Sharon and Billy. They're talking about this. But you know what? It still seems pretty abstract. I don't really know what to do to get started. I just know that I can't invest where I am investing because the numbers keep working out as negative 50 or negative 100 or whatever. So the first thing is to get clear, like, as we were talking about before, like what is it that you specifically want to, what benefit are you looking to derive? And if we'll just say you're looking for cash flow. So you're looking for cash flow, then you want to know which locations in the United States are the ones that are going to make the most sense for you. Sharon, you've already helped people out in this conversation because you've talked about Columbus, Ohio. You've talked about, I mentioned Charlotte earlier. We can mention cities like Atlanta or cities like Philadelphia. Like these are just very practical cities that you can go look up. Afterwards, you want to understand, are more people moving to these cities than leaving these cities? Like that's a really important indicator. A lot of people would talk about net migration. After that, think about some of the different things. What types of companies are there? Are there lots of Fortune 500 companies, or is there one? Is there a large variation in terms of the different industries? Can you find healthcare? Can you find government? Can you find manufacturing? Can you find high tech all in the same place? If so, then these are probably places that you're going to want to start to do more and more homework on. You've already talked about, Sharon, and given very practical examples. What can you do? Well, first of all, you're here, you're watching, you're listening, Sharon. So I know you give people the opportunity to reach out to you, Sharon. So maybe a great way for you to engage with Sharon is to understand, okay, well, what are some of the different things that I can be looking at? What are the things that I can do? I guess the biggest thing that I would say is don't get stuck in paralysis analysis, trying to get everything perfect. I did that for such a long time, and I've missed so many opportunities. And it's why I talk and very openly tell people I'm a recovering perfectionist. So one of the things that I also trying to help people do, or that I'm working to help people to do, is stop trying to get everything perfect. If you try to wait for every single light to be green, you will never leave your home. You will sit at home forever. So coming back to Sharon is, we reach out to you, and then afterwards it's a matter of saying, how do I put this into practice? How do I make sure that I am speaking to the right person? Or speaking to 50 people and eventually going to get to the right person. Well, it's through making phone calls. It's through sending emails to build the relationship. If it's somebody that you don't know, if someone reaches out to you directly, Sharon, and you are able to connect them with someone else, well, guess what? That you've just helped save them a whole bunch of time and a lot of emails and phone calls. At least they can have that one conversation with someone to be able to move forward. So I guess these are a couple of the steps that you can take until you start to make your first offer on that first property or your first investment with someone else. But that will help you to get clarity at a personal level. You'll be at a location that is going to help you to be closer to your goals and dreams. You're starting to build a team, and then that team will also help you to get to specific opportunities or help you vet those specific opportunities. So hopefully that's been helpful in terms of an example of what someone could do.
Yeah, that's a big help. Guys, Billy has a great podcast called Going Long Podcast. So you can find about all of this stuff by listening to his podcast. And I was honored to be a guest on your podcast. And I know that you have coaching programs and other ways that that you can help people. So what's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
I like to give this in a couple of different flavors, Sharon, because I know everybody's so different. And I guess the one thing we've talked a lot about going long or long distance investing, and you talked about the Going Long podcast there, and I'd love to have anyone join me there. And like I said, definitely go check out episode 107. Sharon was there and she was awesome. I would say also, if you want to learn more about some of the mistakes you can avoid with long distance investing, I have an ebook. You can pick it up at billykeels.com/7 mistakes. And you can either write the number or the letters or spell it out in letters, but either way, and that will send you an ebook, help you to understand the 7 mistakes that you can avoid when you get started in going in long distance investing. Also, I love LinkedIn. I know, Sharon, you have awesome posts on LinkedIn as well. They're phenomenal, super positive. I love them all, seeing them all the time. When you connect through LinkedIn, the one thing I would ask you is, just remind me that you heard Sharon and I talking here on Let's Talk Real Estate Investing podcast, because it's just going to help you and I connect more. And I know that you were here and invested time with listening to Sharon and I. And if you just want to check out my website, you can go to billykeels.com. So those are the ways. There's one other one. If you want to speak, you can go to bit.ly/speak with Billy. If you want to just jump on a call, I'm happy to give 30 minutes of my time to anyone from your audience, Sharon. And I think this has been really, really awesome. I thank you so much for the opportunity to share a little bit of my story with you again and with your entire audience.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. And I'll be sure and put those links, and you're going to want to get the ebook too. So I'll put that in the show notes as well. It was great getting to see you again, Billy. Feel like you're right around the corner, but you're not.
Yeah, you're right. It's awesome being able to connect with you again. Thanks so much, Sharon.
Yeah. I want to thank all the listeners that come out week after week. And like Billy said before, I would appreciate it if you'd leave us a rating and a review on iTunes. I would be most appreciative. So have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will see you same time, same place next week. Bye for now.